Kadosh Boker Or, Beki'im Halacha 7, Siman 168, to Masechet, Halacha number Lamed Bet. This is day 14, page 29. The halacha states as follows: if someone decided to make a meal of pataba bekhisanin and eat 216 grams, so he made netilat yadayim, he said the bracha hamotzi, and afterwards he was forced to stop before actually eating the full amount. So imagine he was going to be kovea seudah. All of a sudden something happened, force majeure, whatever it is, but he already did the netilat yadayim, he did the hamotzi, he ate only 100 grams, whatever the case was. So what happens now is he must now say the bracha men shalosh, even though he said hamotzi, but he didn't fulfill the condition of eating a full meal. So therefore, right, he doesn't do Birkat Hamazon. Birkat Hamazon is only if he ate the 216 grams. So now what is he going to do? Men shalosh ala michya. So he says, and he's not guilty of a brachal vatala either. Okay? Look in the footnotes 242 and 243. The response to Grot Moshe comes and he ruled that in such a case, a person may continue eating whatever foods he has, relying on the original bracha hamotzi that he has recited at the beginning of the meal. At the time that he recited the bracha, he has followed halacha correctly, and therefore the blessing covers all the foods, even though he ends up not eating a meals. It means like this: you started with I'm going to make on these crackers, and I'm going to eat 216 grams of crackers. It's going to be a lot. If 3 crackers is a kazait, right? That's 28 grams. So imagine how many I need for 216 grams. You're going to have probably like the entire package or whatever it is. But fine, right? So now what happens is as follows: yeah, you're going to have. So the second that you made a hamotzi, everything else is exempt. I'm not going to make a shakol or a adama or a haetz or why? I'm already exempt and I did everything properly. So he says, but what happens now if you failed to eat for whatever, force majeure, whatever it is, that you weren't able to eat the 216 grams? So he says it's not a brachal vatala. This is a ruling of Yakut Yosef, says 243. It's derived from the ruling cited above in Siman 153, that if someone said the bracha netilat yadayim and then was forced to stop eating before he eats the kabetza, right, to justify reciting the bracha, he's not guilty of saying a bracha vatala. He wanted to eat the proper amount. So the same thing was netilat yadayim. You only make a bracha netilat yadayim when you want to eat a kabetza of bread. You did netilat yadayim, and all of a sudden now you come and you're only able to eat a kazait. Why? There was not a kabetza, whatever the case was. There's no bracha vatala. You wanted to eat a kabetza. Force something happened. Now there's no kabetza, but that was your intention when you made the bracha, so there's no problem. Okay, fine. Now he comes and he says, yeah, halacha number 33. Okay, halacha 33. You began a snack and ended up eating up. What about the opposite way? Beforehand, you wanted to eat a full meal, and then at the end you weren't able to. Now, the exact opposite. You wanted to eat a snack, yeah, and then you ended up a full meal. So he says like this: if someone began eating cake without the intention of eating a meal's volume, and he recited with him in mezonot, but then, while eating, he decided to make his meal from the cake, he must say Birkat Hamazon when he finishes eating. If he plans to eat the volume of 4 eggs from the cake after making the decision, he must perform the netilat yadayim before he continues eating. It's not imperative to recite the bracha al netilat yadayim in this case, but if someone decides that he wishes to recite this blessing, he has a basis to rely upon, right? As explained in Siman 158.5. If he plans to eat less than that amount, he does not have to perform netilat yadayim, even though he will end up, he says, with less than that amount. He does not have to perform netilat yadayim, even though he will end up with the amount of the total of the 4 eggs. See the footnote regarding the need to recite a new bracha over the food he plans to eat for the rest of the meal. Meaning, forget about now a new bracha, right? For sure, there's no problem whatsoever. Right? Why? He says he doesn't have to do the netilat yadayim, but if he wants to say a bracha, he has what to rely on. Okay? Yes, and then it ends up being. Now the question is, does he have to make a new bracha or not? Right? Because now he wants to come and he wants to eat the full meals. Right? So that's the question. Look in the 244. Magen Avraham discusses halacha, right? Citing the response of the Marshak. And he says like this. He says it's ruling that if someone recited mezonot in order to eat cake and then wanted to eat a meal, but the volume is attained only by combining the amount that he ate before and after he changed his mind, he does not have to make a new bracha, not hamotzi or not mezonot. But if he plans to eat now a volume of a meal, he has to do netilat yadayim and hamotzi. Meaning like this: he was only going to eat a small amount of bread, mezonot bread, let's say. Right? He's going to have a half a bagel, whatever it is. So he comes, makes mezonot. All of a sudden he says, you know what? I'm going to have a full lunch. Now he's going to have now 216 grams. So obviously now he does have to do netilat yadayim and Birkat Hamazon, hamotzi. obviously. But if he's just going to have a meaning that if he's only just going to combine what he already ate and now what he's going to eat now, he does not make a new beracha. The Kaf HaChaim, Sofer, disagree with this ruling. He maintained that in any case, it's not necessary to say a new beracha on the cake that he's going to eat. He can always rely upon the original Borei Mezonot. And the Yalkut Yosef agree with this. The Halacha Brura, however, took issue with the Kaf HaChaim's ruling. Although it is true that if someone recites a bracha of Borei Mezonot over bread, he's fulfilled his obligation, does not have to recite a hamotzi. In this case, the original blessing cannot help him to take care, right, when he changes his mind. In this case, when he said the original blessing, he didn't have in mind to eat so much cake. The extra cake was not bichlal, not part of the bracha. So now that he changed his mind, now he does need to make a bracha. So the Chabra wrote this is also the ruling of Rabbi Kiva as well. In fact, Rabbi Kiva wrote that if someone began eating a piece of cake and then a tray of cake was offered to him and he decided to eat a meal's volume, right? He says he does not need to recite the new bracha to finish the amount of the cake, right? This is because he's already recited a blessing of the amount of cake. Although he's now considered bread, his original blessing of Borei Mezonot can still cover it. Once he begins eating the new cake, he must still recite the bracha of hamotzi. Okay, it might be that this does not contradict the ruling of the Kaf HaChaim. If we say he was describing a case where all the cake was there, right, on the table from the beginning. The person began to eat a piece of cake, thinking that he would just snack on it, but did not make a positive decision to limit any amount. Then he changed his mind and decided to eat the volumes cake. Sometimes happens. Since he was aware of all the cake from the beginning of the meal, right, so he says, although it was a blessing of Borei Mezonot, and this cake is now considered bread for him, if he had definitely only a limited amount, right, or the tray of cake was just not on the table until afterwards, Chavachim would agree that he has to say a new bracha. Lichot Olam comes and Piskei Teshuvot also he says like this. He says, see the footnote where explained that if someone recited bracha Borei Mezonot and afterwards decided to eat more, his blessing counts for the extra amount as well. So he says this case might be different, however. Maran ruled in Siman 206 that the original bracha, right, covers the extra food since it calls for the identical bracha. Meaning, let's say I wanted to eat 2 crackers, and now I'm going to eat 3. It's the same bracha. So therefore, I don't have to make a new bracha on the extra cracker that I decide, you know what, I'm going to eat another cracker. But he comes and he says, in this case, right, afterwards it becomes hamotzi. So it's like, it's a different bracha. Because now that I'm going to eat more, it's a new bracha. It's not the same bracha. So perhaps in this case, he does have to make a new bracha. Apparently, the Kaf HaChaim felt that since it's identical food, you don't have to make new bracha because it didn't change the status of the food. The food is the same food. The only question is, are you now going to make hamotzi or not? But it's the same food. So he says, according to this halacha, is that someone served a tray of cupcakes and he only decided to eat 2 of them and then changed his mind and wanted to eat 4 of them. He has to do netilat yadayim in hamotzi. When he finishes, he must say Birkat Hamazon. The same applies only if he had 2 cupcakes when he recited the first bracha and then was served 2 more extra afterwards. But if he only had 2 cupcakes in the beginning while eating and he decided to get 4 more cupcakes, he must now do netilat yadayim in hamotzi, right? If he plans to eat only 2 more, so then no, right? Then it's he now has to just say Borei Mezonot, but in either case he still has to say Birkat Hamazon. So it's yeah. He's going to think 3 times before doing anything, no? Before is he actually going to eat more or not? Fine. The last halacha 34. If someone ate a meal's volume, okay, of pata bekhisanin, yes, say Birkat Hamazon. If he's full from the meal and later cannot remember if he said Birkat Hamazon or not, he must now recite it now to resolve his uncertainty. Since he became from the meal, all right, the full meal, we do not say Saveh Berachot Lakel. Meaning, usually, if you had a doubt whether you said Bracha Acharona or not, you don't make the Bracha Acharona. But here, it's a full meal. Once it's a full meal, Birkat Hamazon. Now you have a doubt, you have to say Birkat Hamazon. You don't know if I said it or I didn't say it, you have to say it. Let's say 245, this is the ruling of the Rishon LeZion. He said he equated this to a case where someone ate regular bread and now cannot remember that he said Birkat Hamazon. He has to say it out of doubt. Since it's obligation by the Torah to recite Birkat Hamazon, once he became full, when someone eats the volumes of Pata Bekhisanin becomes full, he's likewise is going to be obligated, by the Torah Birkat Hamazon. Although some poskim ruled that in this case, obligation to say Birkat Hamazon is not a midoraita, Rishon LeZion, he refuted it. Furthermore, he argued that there's common basis to say that this person is obligated to recite Birkat Hamazon. First of all, perhaps all the type of Pata Bekhisanin is really bread. So, for example, he ate regular cake. So options A and C is still hamotzi. Furthermore, somebody shouldn't even obligate to say, right, a blessing after eating any 7 species, right, of the land of Eretz Yisrael. So he says some cakes, such as baklava, are definitely pata bekhisanin, since they fit each of the 3 definitions given to this term. The above compound doubt will not apply if someone had eaten a meal of these products and then cannot remember whether or not he recited Birkat Hamazon. Nevertheless, it appears that Rishon LeZion would rule that he must recite it, right, in such a case of since he considered, right, he says he considered a doubt concerning a Torah mitzvah. What about wafers? Wafers seem to be one of the products that are put bekhisanin according to all three definitions. You remember we said that wafer or baklawa is according to all three because it's crunchy, filled, and it's got it's in the dough also. So he said they're filled with cream. The dough itself contains sugar and flavoring, and the wafer is dry and crunchy. Yakuza question this: since the wafer softens immediately upon being placed in one's mouth, so it might not have a definition of crunchy. Furthermore, the cream filling is not baked between the wafer layers; it's added right after they've been baked. Right, but the Letzion rule that despite these points, it's pata bekhisanin according to every opinion. So you've got a machloket between that. But again, I don't know about in your mouth because a lot of things in your mouth they become soft. Which one? Ah. Okay. No, but again, here we're talking about not even in the bracha achrona. Here we're talking about in the middle of the meal. Because in the middle of a meal, I take a wafer, do I make mezonot? In the middle of a meal. So if it's mezonot according to all three opinions, I do make a bracha in the middle of the meal. Yeah, that's the three conditions in order to make a bracha in the middle of the meal. Because it has to be mezonot according to all opinions. So it has to be crunchy, filling, and this. So the Yakuza would say, no, it's not filling. Why? It was only added afterwards, right? And then he says it's not crunchy because in your mouth it becomes soft. The Letzion says that that's one of the three conditions. It's 100% that this is going to be one of the three.